My parents doted on my golden child brother and let him torment me for years, until the day I couldn't take it anymore and ran away from home. 7 years later, they reached out wanting my help. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now, let's start the video. Alright, Reddit, this is a 13-year ride through family dysfunction and abuse. It's about how my psychopath older brother destroyed my teenage years. How my parents enabled him and how they showed their true colors when my uncle got sick. Then how karma delivered the perfect payback when they least expected it. I'll paint you a picture of what growing up in my house was actually like. My older brother, 27 male, Ian was basically a 6'3" sociopath with a football scholarship and zero conscience. 3 years older, built like he could deadlift a Honda Civic, and had this dead-eyed predator stare that made prison guards nervous. Kid was legitimately unhinged, but everyone thought he was the next Aaron Rodgers. The abuse wasn't random sibling rivalry. Ian had turned torturing me into an art form. Take what happened with Jessica Martinez, and this girl I'd been crushing on since middle school. Spent months working up the courage to ask her to homecoming. Ian found out and decided this was prime entertainment. Dude waited until lunch period when the cafeteria was packed, then walked up to Jessica's table. "Hey, Jessica," he said loud enough for half the school to hear. "My little brother's been stalking you for months, but he's too much of a coward to ask you out himself. How about you go with a real man instead?" Jessica said yes immediately. Who wouldn't want to go with the star quarterback? Ian made sure I was watching when he asked her, maintaining eye contact like he was marking territory. Then he dumped her 2 days before the dance and told everyone she was practice for his little brother's leftovers. The story spread through school how Ian had to ask out girls for his pathetic little brother who couldn't handle rejection. Or take what happened when I finally made junior varsity basketball as a sophomore. I'd been practicing shots in our driveway for 2 years. Finally had decent form and coach thought I had potential. Made the team on a Tuesday. Thursday morning, coach pulled me aside and said there had been complications. Ian had convinced him that having both brothers on teams would create favoritism issues. Got cut before playing a single game while Ian played varsity and waved at me during timeouts with this sick grin. The psychological warfare was next level. When I trained for months for this local 5K race, running every morning before school and tracking my times, Ian showed up race day in running gear. For the entire 3.1 miles, Ian ran right beside me providing commentary. "You always breathe like that when you run. Dad's going to be embarrassed if you collapse." Final stretch comes and Ian sprints past me like I'm standing still, arms raised in victory. Spent the next month telling everyone how he had to slow down to not embarrass his little brother too badly. The absolute worst was what Ian did to my confidence with girls. Like Amy Chen, this girl in my AP physics class who seemed to like talking to me about robotics. We'd been study partners for weeks when Ian showed up to our session uninvited. Spent the entire time telling embarrassing stories about me. How I used to wet the bed until I was 12. How I'd never actually kissed a girl. Amy went from interested to completely uncomfortable. Never spoke to me again outside of class requirements. The physical abuse was constant and calculated. Ian had studied exactly how to inflict maximum pain without leaving evidence that would get him in trouble with coaches or college scouts. Gut punches that left me dry heaving but no visible bruising. Joint locks that made me see stars but didn't damage anything permanently. Wrestling moves that were just excuses to grind my face into carpet or slam me into walls. His favorite was this thing he called motivation sessions down in the basement during his workout routine. He'd corner me while lifting, use me as a practice dummy, all while delivering psychological beatdowns. "You know why Dad introduces me as his son but introduces you as Ian's little brother?" He'd say while grinding my face into the workout mat. "Because you're not worth claiming." My parents saw all of this happening and treated it like natural selection in action. "Ian's toughing you up," Mom would say when I complained about getting my lunch money stolen daily. "Boys need to learn hierarchy early or they'll never succeed." Dad was even worse, actively encouraging Ian's behavior as leadership development. "Good job keeping him motivated," he'd tell Ian after particularly brutal sessions. Real leaders know how to push their team to be better. The favoritism was so extreme, it felt like living in a parallel universe. Ian got a brand new truck at 16. I got told to earn what you want when I asked for $5 for the bus. Ian could throw parties that destroyed half the house and get thanked for being social and building networks. I got grounded for leaving a glass in the sink. When Ian's grades started slipping junior year, they hired private tutors and blamed his teachers for not understanding athlete schedules. When I maintained a 3.8 GPA while working weekends, they said it should be higher and maybe I needed to focus more on school instead of those computer hobbies. The double standard was insane. Ian got suspended for putting some kid in the hospital during football practice. Really just Ian losing his temper and going psycho. And they hired lawyers and threatened to sue everyone involved. When I got jumped by 3 seniors for being Ian's weird little brother and came home with a black eye and split lip, They spent 20 minutes asking what I'd done to bring it on myself. The message was crystal clear. Ian was the investment. I was the mistake they had to tolerate until I turned 18 and became someone else's problem. The only person in my entire extended family who treated me like I mattered was Uncle Caleb, my dad's younger brother. Dude was everything my father wasn't. Successful without stepping on people, confident without being cruel, and actually interested in what I had to say instead of constantly comparing me to Ian. Caleb owned a construction company that he'd built from nothing after getting out of the army, specialized in custom homes, had a crew of guys who'd been with him for years, and lived in this incredible house he'd designed himself. Caleb started having me over every other weekend, teaching me construction and mechanics in his workshop. The guy had every tool you could imagine. For a kid who loved building things, it was paradise. More importantly, it was somewhere Ian wasn't allowed to follow me. My parents had tried to make these visits about both boys, but Caleb shut that down immediately. That's where I learned real skills. Wiring, framing, rebuilding engines, welding, power tools. Caleb treated me like a junior partner, explaining why we did things certain ways and letting me make mistakes without screaming at me. That's also where I met Alex, Caleb's business partner's son, who was dealing with his own family pressure. Alex's dad was this successful surgeon who expected his kid to follow the same path. But Alex wanted to be an engineer and design things instead of cutting people open. We bonded immediately over being the disappointing sons who didn't fit our family's predetermined molds. Alex was this skinny kid with thick glasses who could rebuild a carburetor blindfolded and explain how computer processors worked. But his dad saw him as a failure because he didn't want to spend his life in operating rooms. My old man thinks engineering is just applied mediocrity. Alex told me one weekend while we were installing a new sound system in Caleb's truck. Says anyone who's smart enough to be an engineer should be smart enough to be a doctor instead. Alex became the brother I should have had. We'd work on projects together, cover for each other when family drama hit, and most importantly, he treated me like an equal instead of Ian's defective younger model. Your brother's a piece of shit, Alex told me one day while we were troubleshooting a computer. But you're going to be something special. You've got that thing where you see how stuff works. Caleb's workshop became my sanctuary. Every other weekend, I could actually relax and focus on building things instead of constantly watching my back for Ian's next attack. You've got natural mechanical intelligence, Caleb told me after I'd figured out why his table saw was vibrating and fixed it by adjusting the belt tension. That's something you're born with. Can't be taught. Ian's never going to have that no matter how many touchdowns he scores. More importantly, Caleb was teaching me that success didn't require destroying other people. His crews respected him because he was competent and fair, not because he intimidated them. His business was growing because he did quality work, not because he cut corners or screwed over competitors. Those weekends at Caleb's place were the only times I felt like myself instead of just Ian's weird little brother. The final straw that shattered any remaining hope for my family came during the spring of my junior year. I'd been working on this robotics project for the state competition, building an autonomous navigation robot from scratch with parts I bought using money from working weekends with Caleb. This wasn't some LEGO Mindstorms kit robot. I'm talking about a serious piece of engineering. Custom Arduino control system, ultrasonic sensors, GPS navigation, the works. Spent months designing the chassis, programming the navigation algorithms, fine-tuning the sensor array. It was legitimately impressive work that had actual scholarship potential. The robot could navigate complex obstacle courses, map unknown environments, and execute precise movement patterns. I'd programmed it to respond to voice commands, avoid moving obstacles, and even return to its starting position from anywhere in a mapped area. This was college-level robotics engineering that I'd taught myself through online tutorials and trial and error. Caleb was incredibly proud of the work I'd done. This is professional-grade stuff, he'd tell his contractor friends who came by to see it. Kid's got engineering talent that most college graduates don't have. Ian discovered it in my room on a Friday night when his girlfriend Brittany and two of his meathead teammates were over for one of their study sessions. Really just an excuse to drink my parents' beer and make noise. I was upstairs working on the final programming when I heard Ian's voice getting louder. Yo, come check this out. Ian called to his friends. Little bro's been building robots in his spare time, pretty nerdy stuff, but actually kind of cool. I came downstairs to find them clustered around my workbench. Ian holding my robot like he just discovered it. The casual way he was handling months of precision work made my stomach drop. Careful with that, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's for state competition next week. Relax, little bro, Ian said with that predatory grin. I'm not going to break your toy. Just showing my friends what you've been working on. But something in his expression had shifted. I could see the wheels turning, that familiar look he got when he was about to destroy something I cared about. Actually, this is pretty impressive work, Ian continued, his voice taking on that fake enthusiasm that always meant trouble. Brittany, you're good with Instagram, right? This would make a sick post. Check out this robot I built for state competition. Ian, no, I said, panic creeping into my voice. That's not yours. You can't just what? Ian's voice went cold. That dead-eyed psycho look taking over. Can't be proud of my family's achievements. Can't share cool stuff with my friends. His teammates were snickering, sensing the shift in energy. Brittany had her phone out, already filming Ian posing with my robot like he was some kind of tech genius. This is months of work, I said, desperation making my voice crack. It's my only shot at a decent scholarship. Please just put it down. You know what? You're absolutely right, Ian said. This is your work, your months of effort. You should definitely have it back. The moment hung in the air like a held breath. I knew what was coming, but couldn't stop it. Ian spiked my robot on the hardwood floor like he was celebrating the winning touchdown of his career. Months of precision engineering exploding into dozens of pieces, circuit boards cracking, sensors scattering across the floor. But he wasn't done. Ian started stomping on the wreckage with his boots, grinding delicate components into the hardwood while maintaining eye contact with me. His friends were filming the whole thing, laughing and cheering like they were watching prime entertainment. Oops, Ian said with mock concern. Guess your little toy wasn't as tough as you thought. Maybe next time build something that can handle the real world. Something in my brain just snapped. All those years of taking his abuse, all those times I'd back down and let him win, all the humiliation and psychological torture, it all exploded out of me at once. I charged at him without thinking, which was exactly what Ian wanted. He caught me mid-tackle like I was a practice dummy and introduced my face to the wall hard enough to crack the drywall. Then he grabbed me by the throat and started systematically working me over while his audience cheered and filmed. This is what happens when you forget your place, he said between punches. This is what you get for thinking you matter in my house. When the beating was over, I was curled up on the floor with my own blood covering my nose while Ian stood over me. Clean this mess up, he told me, gesturing to the robot wreckage. And next time, remember who's in charge around here? His friends were high-fiving him like he just won the Super Bowl. When my parents rushed in after hearing the commotion, they saw me bleeding on the floor, surrounded by destroyed electronics, and their first instinct was damage control for Ian's reputation. What did you do to embarrass your brother in front of his friends? Mom demanded, not even checking if I needed medical attention. Why can't you just leave him alone when he has company over? Dad was even worse. Started apologizing to Ian's teammates for my inappropriate behavior and lack of respect while I was still spitting blood on their precious hardwood floors. Sorry. Boys. Little brother doesn't understand boundaries yet. Ian's friends were eating it up, talking about how cool my parents were and how Ian was lucky to have family that understood him. My mother was nodding along, actually thanking Ian for keeping me in line and apologizing to Brittany for having to witness my tantrum. They made me clean up the robot pieces while I was still bleeding, then sent me to my room to think about what I'd done. Ian and his friends got to stay downstairs and were treated to pizza and praise for handling the situation maturely. That night, lying in bed with cracked ribs and a face that looked like abstract art, I could hear them laughing about it downstairs. My own parents joking with Ian's friends about how I'd learned my lesson and probably wouldn't act up again anytime soon. They were proud of what had happened. They thought it was good parenting. That's when I called Uncle Caleb. Pack everything important, Caleb said without hesitation. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't let them talk you out of this. Caleb showed up in his pickup truck, took one look at my face, and his expression went from concern to absolutely murderous. He walked me to his truck without saying a word to my parents, who were watching from the window, but didn't have the courage to come outside and face him. Jesus Christ, Caleb said once we were driving away. How long has this been going on? I told him everything. Not just the robot incident, but years of systematic abuse, psychological torture, and parental enabling. Caleb listened in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. You're staying with me permanently, Caleb said when I finished. I'll handle the legal stuff. Your parents obviously can't be trusted to keep you safe. Alex was waiting at Caleb's place with ice packs and genuine concern instead of lectures about what I'd done wrong. Caleb got emergency custody without much fight from my parents. They were actually relieved to have me off their hands so they could focus completely on Ian's football career without the distraction of their problem child. Moved into Caleb's place and started at a new school. Could walk down hallways without constantly watching my back. Could focus on classes without wondering what Ian would destroy next. Alex transferred to my school and we started building our future together. Worked summers learning real construction and business skills from Caleb. Started a small computer repair service that actually made decent money. Nothing crazy, but honest work that I was genuinely good at. For 2 years, life was actually good. I had a family that supported me, friends who respected me, and a future that didn't involve constant fear and humiliation. Then, Caleb got the news that changed everything. It started with Caleb feeling tired all the time, losing weight without trying. He'd always been this powerhouse of energy, but suddenly he was struggling to keep up with job site demands. When the fatigue got bad enough that he was falling asleep during meetings, Alex finally convinced him to see a doctor. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Doctors gave him maybe 18 months with aggressive treatment, possibly less. Well, that's not ideal, Caleb said after the oncologist delivered the news. Even facing a death sentence, the guy was making jokes to keep everyone else from falling apart. You'd think this devastating news would bring the family together, right? That facing the loss of a loved one would make people put aside petty differences and focus on what really mattered. You'd be wrong. My parents' reaction to Caleb's diagnosis was a masterclass in narcissistic selfishness. Their first concern wasn't Caleb's health or how to support him through treatment. It was how his illness would affect their social standing and financial situation. "This is so difficult for us," Mom complained during their one visit to Caleb's house after the diagnosis. "Having to deal with cancer in the family when we're already stressed about Ian's college recruitment. It's just one more thing we have to worry about." Dad was more direct about his real concerns. "What's going to happen to the business when?" He paused, not wanting to say "when you die" out loud. "I mean, Caleb's got a lot of assets tied up in that company. Somebody needs to think about what happens to all that." Here was Caleb facing his own mortality, and they were already calculating how his death might benefit them. But Ian was in a league of his own when it came to cruelty. When word got around school that my uncle was sick, Ian actually told people that Caleb probably deserved it for choosing a lifestyle that led to cancer. When I confronted him about it during one of his rare visits home from college prep camp, Ian just shrugged like he was discussing the weather. "Look, I'm not saying I'm happy about it," Ian said with that same deaded expression. "But maybe this will teach him not to interfere with family business. He never should have gotten involved with your drama." This was the man who'd saved my life, who'd shown me what real family looked like. And Ian was essentially saying he deserved to die for caring about me. I moved back in with Caleb full-time to help him through treatment. Alex and I took turns driving him to chemotherapy appointments, managing his business when he was too sick to work, making sure he had everything he needed to stay comfortable. Meanwhile, my parents visited maybe twice and spent both visits complaining about how difficult everything was becoming for them, how they couldn't focus on Ian's career with all this medical drama happening, how they didn't have time to deal with family obligations when they were already stretched thin. Caleb bore it all with incredible grace, never complaining about the lack of support from his own brother, never expressing bitterness about their selfishness. He just focused on what time he had left and making sure Alex and I were prepared for whatever came next. "Family isn't about blood," Caleb told me one night after a particularly brutal chemo session. "It's about who shows up when you need them. You two have been more family to me than I had any right to expect." The final blow came during Caleb's last few weeks. He was in the hospital, barely conscious most of the time, and my parents finally showed up for what they knew would be their last visit. Instead of offering comfort or support, my father walked into Caleb's room and said, "You know, Caleb, maybe this is God's way of teaching you that family comes first. You never should have interfered with how we raised our boys." Caleb was too weak to respond, but I saw the hurt flash across his eyes. That was the moment I realized my father wasn't just an enabler or a bad parent, he was genuinely cruel. Here was his brother dying, and Dad's priority was making sure Caleb knew he'd been wrong to help me. I asked them to leave that day and told them not to come back. Caleb deserved to spend his final days surrounded by people who actually loved him, not selfish parasites looking for ways to make his death about themselves. Caleb passed away on a Tuesday morning in March with me holding his hand. Alex was there, too, along with Rodriguez and a few other guys from his crew who'd become like father figures to me over the years. My parents showed up for the funeral, of course. Spent most of the service talking with Caleb's contractor friends and business associates about how difficult this loss was for them and how much they'd miss their dear brother. Ian came home from college for the funeral and spent the entire service texting on his phone. When people offered condolences, he'd give them this practiced sad smile and talk about how Caleb was finally at peace. A week later, Caleb's lawyer called to schedule a reading of the will. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday morning at the lawyer's office. My parents showed up in their best outfits, clearly expecting this to be a significant financial event for them. Ian drove down from college, probably figuring he'd inherit enough to cover his remaining tuition. The lawyer, a guy named Morrison, who'd known Caleb for 20 years, got straight to business. Caleb was very specific about his wishes. Morrison began pulling out a thick document. He updated this will 6 months ago when his diagnosis became terminal. He started with some small bequests, tools and equipment to his crew, donations to local charities, that sort of thing. Then he dropped the bomb to my nephew who showed me what family actually means. "I leave my house, my business, all associated assets and equipment, and the remainder of my estate, including all savings and investment accounts." The silence in that room was deafening. My parents went through about 6 different emotions in 10 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally pure rage. "That can't be right," my father said, his voice shaking. "Caleb wouldn't leave everything to a teenager. There must be some mistake." Morrison handed me a sealed envelope. "Caleb also left you this letter." I opened it with trembling hands while my parents sat there in shock. Caleb's handwriting was shaky but clear. "To my real son, you showed me what family actually means when mine turned their backs on me. You were there when I needed you most. While the people who shared my blood treated me like a burden, you earned every bit of this by being the man they couldn't be. Build something amazing with this inheritance. And remember that you didn't just inherit money and property. You inherited the responsibility to be better than they were. The business is yours now. But Rodriguez and the crew have contracts guaranteeing their jobs for life. Take care of them like they took care of me. P. S. Your parents are going to lose their minds about this. Let them. You owe them nothing. The letter was like Caleb speaking from beyond the grave, validating every decision I'd made and every sacrifice I'd endured. My parents absolutely lost their "this is fraud." Dad was shouting, his face turning purple. Caleb was manipulated. He wasn't in his right mind. We'll contest this, Will. Mom was yelling how unfair it all was and how they deserved something after all they'd been through with Caleb's illness. Ian was the worst, demanding I share what Uncle Caleb stole from the family because we were brothers and family should stick together. The entitlement was unreal. These people who treated Caleb like garbage while he was dying now felt they deserved his life's work because of shared DNA. You were supposed to be the family failure, Ian said, his mask finally slipping completely. You were supposed to amount to nothing so the rest of us could feel good about our choices. This isn't how it's supposed to work. Morrison explained that the will was ironclad. Caleb had been of sound mind when he'd written it, had included specific provisions to prevent challenges, and had documented years of evidence about my parents' neglect and Ian's abuse. Caleb was very thorough. Morrison said he anticipated this reaction and prepared accordingly. I walked out of that office with Caleb's house keys, business documents, and more money than I'd ever imagined having. More importantly, I walked out with the validation that the man I'd respected most in the world thought I'd earned it. My parents spent months threatening to sue, hiring lawyers and looking for any way to break Caleb's will. They never found one. Caleb had been too smart and too thorough. With Caleb's inheritance, I had options I never could have dreamed of. Paid for college without loans, kept Caleb's construction business running successfully, and most importantly, I had the financial security to build the life I actually wanted instead of just surviving day to day. Decided to study computer science at the state university while keeping the construction business operational. Rodriguez stepped up as foreman and basically ran day-to-day operations while I was in classes. The crew was incredibly loyal to Caleb's memory and worked their asses off to make sure his company continued thriving. I expanded the computer repair service I'd started with Alex into a legitimate tech support business serving Caleb's construction clients. Started offering services like network setup for job sites, digital project management systems, and security camera installations. Alex stayed my business partner and best friend through everything. We commuted to college together, studied together, and spent summers growing both businesses. Having someone who'd been through the family dysfunction with me made everything easier. Met Leah during a computer science study group junior year. She was this brilliant programmer who was double majoring in CS and mathematics, could debug code that had me stumped for hours. Leah was different from any girl I'd ever talked to. She was genuinely interested in how things worked instead of just what they could do for her. When I told her about Caleb's construction business, she wanted to visit job sites and understand how we managed complex projects. When I showed her the tech support systems I'd developed, she immediately saw ways to improve them. You've built something really impressive here, she told me after spending a weekend helping upgrade our project management software. Most people our age are just trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives. You're already doing it. When I finally told her the whole story about my family situation, Leah didn't pity me or treat me like I was damaged goods. She was genuinely impressed that I'd survived all that abuse and still managed to become a decent person. We graduated together. Alex with his engineering degree, me with my CS degree, and Leah with both her majors and job offers from 3 different tech companies. She chose the local offer specifically because she wanted to stay and help grow what we'd built together. Alex became my official business partner in both the construction and tech support companies. We incorporated everything properly, brought Rodriguez in as a minority owner of the construction business, and started planning real expansion. Leah and I moved in together after graduation. Got a nice apartment near both our offices. For my 24th birthday, Leah surprised me with a golden retriever puppy from the local shelter. Named him Rex after the T-Rex in Toy Story, which somehow seemed fitting. Rex became the family mascot for both businesses. Construction crews loved having him around job sites, and he had this amazing ability to calm down stressed clients when their networks crashed. 2 years later, I proposed to Leah on the deck of the house Caleb had built. Used my grandmother's ring that Caleb had somehow convinced my parents to give him before they realized how much the inheritance was worth. The wedding was small but perfect. Leah's family, Alex and his girlfriend, Rodriguez and some of the crew, plus a few close friends we'd made in college. 3 months after the wedding, I was working late in my office when my phone rang. Unknown number, but something made me answer it anyway. Son, we saw the photos from your wedding. My father's voice came through, shaky, like he'd been drinking or crying. We can't believe you didn't invite your own family to such an important day. The guilt trip was immediate and shameless. How I'd broken Mom's heart by excluding them from my wedding. How Ian was devastated to miss his little brother's special day. How they deserved to be there despite everything that had happened years ago. We know there were some difficulties when you were younger, Dad continued. But we're still your parents. Family should mean something, especially during important life events. I let him talk, curious to see where this was really going. Didn't take long to find out. The truth is, we need your help, he finally admitted, his voice breaking. Ian's in serious trouble. Got arrested for dealing steroids to high school kids through his coaching job. He's looking at real prison time, and we can't afford good lawyers. There it was. After 7 years of no contact, after missing my wedding, after treating Caleb like garbage while he was dying, they wanted me to bail out the golden child who'd made my teenage years a living hell. We heard about Caleb's inheritance. Mom grabbed the phone, her voice thick with tears. We know you inherited substantial assets. Ian's your brother. You have to help him. Why would I do that? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Because we're family, Mom started sobbing. Despite everything, we're still your parents. We gave you life. We raised you. And now when we need help most, you're the only one who can save us. You didn't raise me, I said quietly. Caleb raised me. Please, Dad was begging now. All pretense of authority gone. Ian's learned his lesson. He knows he made mistakes. He's changed. You're the only one who can afford good legal representation. Let me ask you something, I said, feeling strangely calm. When Ian beat me unconscious, did you think about saving me? When he sabotaged every friendship I tried to make, did you care about my future? When Caleb was dying and you told him he deserved it for helping me, did family mean anything then? The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. We made mistakes, Mom whispered. We know that now, but Ian's looking at 10 years in prison. His whole life will be ruined. You're successful now. You have money. Surely you can find it in your heart to forgive. I already did forgive, I said. I forgave you years ago because carrying that anger was poisoning my life. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm obligated to rescue you from the consequences of your choices. You can't just abandon family, Dad shouted, his desperation turning to anger. You enabled years of systematic abuse because it was easier than admitting you'd raised a monster. You treated the one man who actually cared about me like garbage. Because he threatened your narrative about Ian being special. That's not fair. Mom started. You had a son who would have done anything for his family. I continued, cutting her off. Someone who worked hard, stayed out of trouble, and actually gave a damn about other people. Instead, you chose the psychopath who's now facing federal drug charges. You threw away the wrong kid. We're sorry. Mom was sobbing now. We know we made terrible mistakes, but Ian's our son, too. He needs help. Please. Dad was crying now. This broken man who'd once stood by while his golden child tortured me. He's your brother. Blood has to mean something. I could hear both of them crying on the other end of the line. Don't call again. Don't show up anywhere near me. And don't contact my wife or my business. Ian dug his own grave. Let him lie in it. Then I hung up. Ian called me personally 2 days later from county jail, crying and begging like a child. He was whimpering about how sorry he was and how he'd learned his lesson and found God in jail. Remember what you used to tell me? I asked him. That I needed to learn my place. Well, I learned it. My place is running 2 successful businesses, living in the house Caleb built, and being surrounded by people who actually give a damn about me. Your place is exactly where you belong. Behind bars. Forgotten. And completely irrelevant to anyone who matters. Please. Ian sobbed. I know I was terrible to you. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen to me in prison. You should have thought about that before you decided to deal drugs to high school kids, I said. Actions have consequences, Ian. You're finally learning that lesson. I'll do anything, he begged. I'll apologize publicly. I'll admit everything I did to you. I'll make it right somehow. There is no making it right, I said quietly. You can't unbreak what you destroyed. You can't give me back my confidence, my projects, my teenage years, or my relationship with my parents. The damage is permanent. But we're brothers. No, I said firmly. We're not. You were my biggest bully who happened to live in the same house. I hung up and blocked all their numbers. 6 months later, I heard through Alex's dad, who still had connections in their social circle, that Ian took a plea deal for 8 years in federal prison. My parents lost their apartment and moved in with my mom's sister in another state. Dad's attempts to restart his construction business failed because word had gotten around about how he treated Caleb. Meanwhile, Leah and I just closed on a bigger house in the neighborhood where Caleb used to live. Rodriguez is retiring next year, and we're throwing him a party that'll be legendary. Alex and his wife are expecting their first kid and asked us to be godparents. I built the life Caleb always said I deserved. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you really like our videos, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.